Hello and welcome to PA Awareness Week. We have 3 members of our FPA Education Committee joining us today to talk about the move from clinical practice into PA education, or alongside clinical practice. So I just want to introduce Alex and Mo. So Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Alex Bennett. I'm one of the physician associates at Gloucester Hospital's NHS Trust. I currently work in trauma and orthopaedics, kind of as my clinical side of things, and academically I'm an associate lecturer at the University of West of England.
Thank you. And Mo?
Hi everyone. So my name is Mohammed Hussain. I'm a PA graduated in 2013 and I've been in general practice ever since. But I also moved to academia part-time from July 2017, where I was initially a module leader on the course at the University of Bradford, and then became program leader from June 2020.
Thank you. And I'm Amy Perrott, and I qualified in 2010, and I've been working at St George's teaching PAs since 2014, and I am a module lead and the interim deputy course director. What's your advice for PAs moving from clinical work into academia?
So I'd say don't be scared is the first thing, because it's always quite a scary thought that actually I definitely know when I was teaching it was a bit of a scared. Am I actually ready to do this? Am I able to do it? I mean, I'm assuming it's the same with the other guys as well. It can be quite a scary step to take, but I think it's been very, very rewarding as well in doing so. And it's getting that foot in the door. So it's, as I'm sure we'll have a chat about, kind of what methods there are to get in the door, because not everyone has a chance to get in, maybe when it feels right for them or not. I know I started quite early on after I qualified, so I've had some kind of teaching experience for the past 10 years or so. So it was quite a transition for me that was not to be unexpected, but it started off doing lectures at the University of Worcester in kind of areas that I had a lot of confidence in, because I've got some kind of personal experience in the sessions I was teaching. And then as I progressed clinically, especially in my trauma job, to a point where I can actually quite happily run sessions on MSK, which I'll be the first person to put my hands up and say it's probably my worst topic when I was a student. I was not great at it, but since qualifying, I've got a lot better, thankfully, to the point where I'm quite happy to run sessions on that kind of thing. We can also get people progressing into academia kind of a bit more softly than that. So we can start by kind of volunteering to mark at OSCEs. I know quite a few, and it's quite a nice way to get your foot in the door and then build those relationships within the departments and move on from there. But I'm sure the other guys have stuff to say as well.
Yeah, so I was just going back to that actually quickly, Alex. Can you tell us how you first went and moved from a PA student, or with your experience before, into actually being a regular member of staff?
Yeah, so it started off on a bit of an ad hoc basis, just doing bits and bobs when they needed kind of cover or stuff that they knew I was really interested in. And then it's built up from there. So it was originally from having contacts from where I work at the Trust, where we have students come out to us to them saying, oh, do you want to come and do this major trauma day that we've got going on down at UE? So I came and got involved with that. It was a really good fun day to do. And then they started asking if maybe I'd like to just come and do a couple more sessions, and then it snowballed up from there. So from running 2 or 3 teaching sessions to coming and helping at OSCEs to running a couple of sessions with their graduates as we prepared them for national exam, it's kind of rolled into a point of going, oh, actually, this is really useful on both sides. Do you want to come and do a day a week with us? And then I was very lucky that the Trust was able to kind of shift my hours around a little bit. So I now do 4 long days at the Trust and then a day a week at the university teaching.
Excellent. Thank you. Mo, can you tell us a bit about your transition from, alongside your clinical work, into academia?
Yeah, sure. No, I can indeed. So I've always been interested in academia or teaching. In fact, becoming a PA was an 11th hour decision. I was already done dusted in terms of having my PG certificate in secondary education ready. About nearly 10, 11, 12 years ago now, actually. But I chose to be a PA, and I've not looked back since. But in terms of entering academia from clinical work, in a similar essence, similar to Alex, actually, but I was a PA, back in 2013. So I'd been working in 2 or 3 general practices up to the point where I entered sort of academia. So in terms of clinical knowledge, I agree, Alex. There are certain competencies, or should I say, conditions I wasn't quite comfortable in, and then they're teaching them in your very first week in academia. But I felt I needed a few years in order to sort of really get to grips with primary care and the associated conditions that you see within primary care. So and then eventually I thought I would like to sort of diversify rather than just seeing patients every day, because I was doing two sort of full time Monday to Friday for a good 2.5 years, and I thought I did want to do something different. So at the time, University of Bradford started offering their PA course, and just to clarify, I'm a PA working in inner city Bradford, and so they were looking for staff. But prior to that, I did do some sessions on, for example, asthma, how to use a peak flow. I also looked at some of the guidance around how to look after students whilst on placement, and we were fortunate enough to accept PA students from another university within the region. So as I developed my sort of clinical expertise, I also developed my supervision and mentorship and PA leadership sort of skills and abilities as well. So I was supervising PA students in general practice for a good couple of years. And then I did some guest lecturing, OSCE examining as well, as Alex has alluded to already. And then a more formal position came out, which was the module leader for the 60 credit module that ran across both years. And so I decided to sort of step into that, well, apply, and fortunate enough to get it. And at the time, I realised actually I did need to step back from clinical, because full time 2.5 years solid was getting a bit too much, to be honest. And so now I enjoy a beautiful sort of 3-2-day split, 3 days in academia and 2 days in general practice. So yeah, so that's in essence how I got in. And yeah, in terms of sort of following on from that, my role has developed from a lecturer to becoming a module lead, alongside then actually not much teaching, because it was all quite administrative, and then becoming program lead a couple of years after, which I'm happy to elaborate upon shortly. So yeah, so that's a bit about my journey, really. And then in terms of how to move in from sort of clinical work to academia, I'd probably encourage sort of anything that you can do that's sort of teaching related to, in the first instance. So whether that is supervising sort of PAs, it doesn't even have to be PA students, by the way. It could be A&P students, GP regis, for example. Once you've got a bit more, experience in primary care, doing their case-based discussions, doing their mini clinical exercises, for example, supervising them when they do their direct observed procedural skills, and then giving them feedback, because feedback is also an important element of academia as well, as I'm sure my other colleagues on the call would agree. And then there's the sort of ad hoc sessions as well that you may want to offer in terms of, in your neighbouring universities, if there's any areas that you feel comfortable in delivering or teaching on. And even if there's areas that you don't feel comfortable, there's nothing better to actually go over what you're not comfortable in one way to revision for yourself, as well as sort of you might even be able to diversify what you're doing clinically as well. And then writing single best answer questions for any exams, as well as, actually, you might think this is a bit weird, but getting involved in any assessment marking as well, in the sense of any written assessment, whether essays, reflections, etc., portfolio marking as well. Sometimes certain universities do offer or look for experienced PAs in a clinical setting where their input might be actually beneficial, or anything along with sort of looking at curriculum development of a PA course within your region. So yeah, so those are the ways that, and once you've compiled all that together, you'd have a really good sort of CV really to back you for any formal sort of academic role.
So, and that's really helpful, Mo. That was really clear. I was going to say, so the postgraduate certificate in healthcare and biomedical education is something that people can pursue without necessarily having a role within the university. So some environments would help support people do that, which can be a really good way of sort of getting into education. Did you say, Mo, that you already had your qualification?
No, I was interested in secondary education, actually, but I was fortunate enough. I think I was again fortunate in the sense that I got the more formal role because of my experience being a PA at the time, and it was all new in Bradford. However, within my 2 years as part of the course, as part of my probation, I was again fortunate enough to do the PG certificate in clinical education. And so by doing that, I then was actually doing the work prior to actually learning about the work, if that makes sense. So actually doing the course itself gave me all the theory behind why I was doing and what I was doing it for example. So that was really, really helpful. But there are some innovative, preceptorships out there, particularly in West Yorkshire, where we have sort of a PG cert linked into the actual job that you'll be doing in the wards as well, which is quite innovative. So, so if there is any opportunity to enhance your teaching, supervision, leadership in any job you are, whether that's in the trust level, mental health trust level, or in a GP level, I'd really, really encourage you to sort of go into that if you are seriously thinking about a career in academia. And more PAs are getting involved in academia because naturally, the course numbers are growing. People want to diversify their careers a bit more, and academia seems one of the sort of key routes that PAs are wanting to take. So any form of academic experience, whether that's teaching, marking, giving feedback, ad hoc lecturing, OSCE examining, if whatever you can grab your hands on, do take those opportunities.
We were talking a little bit about so whether you come in as a teaching fellow. So some institutions have this level, so you would be a permanent member of staff or on a contract as a teaching fellow, and then that can escalate right up to professor, or whichever the terminology is that you use in your institution. But essentially, I think starting off with just delivery of content, so being able to learn about learning objectives, learning outcomes, what they mean, and delivering a lecture. So Alex, you were talking about doing large group sessions as one of the kind of the first things post-qualification.
Yeah, so the first thing I delivered at all, teaching-wise post-qualification, was a session on diabetes, because it's an area I'm quite happy to cover, an area I've got a bit of extra knowledge in. So started with the stuff that I'm feeling comfortable with, delivering lectures to a whole year group, it was about 30 back then. And being able to deliver to the whole room as well is a nice situation to be in. I quite enjoy doing it, and I think actually it's really nice to be able to reflect back as well as where you were at that point, and what a difference having a really passionate teacher can make to your learning as well.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Being passionate about your content, absolutely. So Mo, you touched on actually assessment there, so writing SBAs or assessing reflections or whatever the assessments are for the institutions. So in terms of opportunities with assessment, do you have anything you wanted to add there?
I do, yeah. So I guess it depends on what your role is. So you could be sort of involved in marking a particular work, whether that's sort of a written assessment, whether that's an exam paper or an OSCE, or depending on like what your role is. So as a module lead, you won't be actually in charge of marking, but you might be in charge of actually preparing the actual assessment. You might be in charge of contributing to the design of the assessment. You might be in charge of quality assuring the assessment, as you may or may not be aware, but all assessments at universities are usually internally and externally moderated.
Yeah.
So you might be involved in, for example, the whole sort of the whole aspect of the assessment and not just the actual marking. You may also be involved in the feedback, in the provision of feedback of the actual assessment, depending on what it is, whether that's a written feedback, whether that's a verbal feedback on a one-to-one level or the whole class level, again, depending on what the actual assessment is. And then on top of that, you'd actually be involved in improving or enhancing the assessment for the coming academic year or years, depending on how long you're able to sort of plan for. And that might be not just your assessment, but actually in tandem with all the other module leaders in relation to their modules assessments as well. Something what we call a spiral curriculum, where you sort of look at stuff that you've done in year one and try to revisit that, or so that you can build upon the students' knowledge, as usually content becomes a bit more complex as you go from year one to year two. And then you might also be a link person to assessment. So what I mean by that is we have a portfolio-based module where I work, and so you might do a lot of work with external stakeholders. So for us, that's our placement team, to look at improving the assessments whilst the students are out on placement. So these particular assessments are more towards with the work-based assessments that our students do. So the ones I mentioned earlier, such as case-based discussion, mini clinical exercises, and direct observed procedural skills. So in that role, you'll be working with the placement to see how can we quality assure these assessments. Are we getting the right sort of supervisors to mark our students on these assessments? It's not everyone might not. There may be certain individuals who aren't appropriate to mark the students on these things. So again, that's a very good role to have actually, because you get to see how our students are performing in the classroom as well as how it's translated into practice as well. But yeah, there's quite a lot in terms of assessment that as a PA you could get involved in academia. And there's also what I've just recently done actually is planning your assessments. So as a program lead, I've had to look at all the assessments on the course for the next 2 years and get that calendar ready so that when our students join us, in fact they've just recently joined us this Monday actually, they know when to accept they know when to expect their assessments, whether that's a submission of an essay, for example, or a reflection, whether it's their OSCE or whether it's their sort of single best answer MCQ exam. And as a reminder, there are some assessments that are formative as well as summative as well. So you have to plan for both, as well as your resits as well, supplementary we call it. So there's quite a lot on assessments.
There is. Thank you, Mo. I was just going to add in there, obviously, research is key, and often we struggle to find the time to write up what we're doing, but actually, there's so many people who are qualified PAs who have got a great deal of experience in research, and any institution would be happy to have that experience on board. So there is absolutely a role for someone to come and help write up articles and papers on what the team have been able to do, and innovative ways of managing education, particularly with the recent events with going virtually and turning into blended learning as we are here.
I'm sure a lot of PAs that are also in academia don't just do PA stuff as well. So lots of interprofessional working and teaching. So we'll share big simulation things between not just PAs. I mean, we do things with paramedics and nurses, and we get their lecturers to come on our course to talk about things they're good at. So pre-hospital medicine, emergency medicine, and we'll also go to have chats and deliver content to other allied health professional subjects as well, which is nice that we're not just PA sticking in the PA lane. We are giving our knowledge across everyone and sharing it.
Absolutely right, and I think that's good to raise the profile with the student body as well, that we're not working in silos, and it doesn't work like that in practice, so it shouldn't work like that when you're studying. The other thing I was going to say is about welfare. So, we obviously take that really seriously. So that's something else that PAs, we do in academia is have personal tutees, and we're closely linked in with our students in terms of their mental and physical health. The FPA Education Committee. So Mo's been on this committee for many, many years. So I'll hand over to him in a sec. But essentially, one of the main things in our remit is the conference. So we have the 2-day virtual conference coming up in December this year. I'm sorry that it's virtual, but it's going to be a fantastic couple of days. We've got 50 different sessions, different speakers from across the UK, different specialties, different backgrounds. Equality and diversity is key in terms of recruiting speakers and considering what topics would be appropriate for the membership. So that's absolutely coming up. So that comes under our remit. Accrediting CPD. So we're looking actually at improving that process at the moment, but looking at the ins and outs of how we actually accredit different CPD applications. Thank you so much, Mo and Alex. I'm really grateful for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So if anyone has any questions about how to join the FPA Education Committee, drop me a line. So my email is aperrett@sgul.ac.uk, or you can find me on the website. So I'd be really happy to chat to you if you're interested in getting involved in education.